Accordia. Good evening to you, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, or if you're watching a recording of this session, welcome to another Fireside Chat, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. Hi, Sherry from New York, Elvira, ciao from Italy, Sal from Ulster. Hi, John and Lynn, lovely to see you both, and Jamie from Ohio, wonderful. Ashanti from Australia, I'm very impressed that you're getting up so early. And Hugh from Taiwan, lovely. Hannah, Tucson, Arizona, wonderful. And freezing Northamptonshire. It's not so cold here, thank goodness. And Sian, I could always say from Germany, and somebody from Sweden, lovely. Poland, oh great. And Debbie from Tipperary. At Glasgow, Norway. My God, there's lots of people from all over the place. It's lovely to see you all. So let me introduce you to my guest this evening. We're staying in Ireland this evening, and I'd like to introduce Wolf Lorien. Wolf, you're so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Thanks very much, Eimear. Thank you.
So we've got people from Finland. My God, it's Germany. The Wirral, cold again. Sorry about that. And the south coast, cold coast of the UK and Aberdeenshire. So welcome, Wolf. There's a big yay from Pat Booker in Ulster.
Hello, Pat.
So just tell our viewers where you're from, or where you are, and then where you're from originally, because people will gather by your accents that you're not Irish. Well, not originally Irish anyway.
Yeah. No, well, now for the last 20 odd years, I've been living in County Clare, out on the west coast of Ireland. And before that, I lived in a few different places, but mostly in the south of England. I moved over when I was 30, so that's actually 24 years ago now. So yeah.
So what's your, because people may not be aware that Melanie, your wife, was on a few months ago,
yes.
but for those who may not have heard her speak about your landscape, so just to tell us a little bit about your landscape there.
Yes. Well, actually, first of all, if you walk up, our house is nestled into the hill. One of my neighbours many years ago told me that there was a particular winter of bad storms in the late 1800s, and there was a period of time after that where a lot of the houses were built back into the hills to have that bit more shelter. So there's no back door from our house. You'd just be straight into the mountain. If I go up the hill from where I am, there's a little spot where actually we did our initiation when we started the course, where on top of the hill there's this large square slab of stone, and from there you're looking out, and to the left there's the Burren, which is a place of special scientific interest. Then you've got the whole of Galway Bay. On a really good day you can see the 12 pins, Connemara. And if you just go up over the hill to the other side, then you're looking off into Offaly. So it's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful view. And when you come down from the top of the hill there, basically there's all these hidden, tucked away little sort of streams that just charge water off the top of the mountain when it's raining. And within those gullies, you'll get these hanging woodlands. Some beautiful trees and bluebells. It's all very wild. My nearest neighbour I can kind of point to across the valley. So it's a very soft green landscape because the Atlantic weather hits the other side of the hill. So by the time it comes over us, it's usually, we'll get a bit of the blessing of the rain. It's just a bit of soft rain. And yes, we're very lucky. It's a fair few miles to the nearest shop, and it's a very soft, quiet landscape. Some mornings in the winter, like at the moment, Because from my house, if I look off towards the south, I can see off to Shannon.
Yeah.
And because we're up on these hills in the winter, the mist will come in, or there'll be low cloud. And literally, and I had this experience once when I first went to Glastonbury, the cloud is below you, and you just have 2 or 3 tiny islands of the hills rising above the cloud.
Magic.
And it's just fantastic. I had when I was about 17, I think, when I first had my learned to drive, I went down to Glastonbury. Didn't even know there was a pathway up it. Literally just went straight up the side. Um, it was kind of I can't remember if I think it was late at night rather than early morning. And yes, we suddenly came out of all this fog to an empty tor with the clouds just stretching off forever, and it was fantastic. Such an introduction to a magical place.
Oh,
But yes, so this place reminds me a little bit of that some mornings.
it's beautiful. I'm just struck by not many people talk about Offaly in Ireland. We were talking about scenic places, and that's where I was born. And I'm just curious as to when you said when you look over the other side, you see Offaly. What do you see?
Well, we're actually because a lot of the area here is planted with firs. You know, there's a
Mhm.
lot of forestry. So when I look off
You mean
into
fir trees or
yeah,
firs, as in
fir
fir
trees,
trees?
you know, it's quilcher land. So you'll have belts of broadleaf, and then you'll have an awful lot of fir trees and things like that. There's a lot of rowan. Um, so actually, when I look off in that direction, it's mostly woodland I'm looking at. Um, and you'll, as I teach night classes up in County Galway. And you know, when I refer to this part of the world, they'll say, you know, because it's very quiet and it's mostly woodlands, they refer to it as bandit country. But yeah, so it's mostly woodland, but occasionally you'll be walking through the forest there, and you'll find the stones of an old house. You know, there's a lot of ruins in amongst it, because I think a lot of the land was bought in bulk. So yeah, so one night actually we went up to the top of the mountain to do a ritual, and the stone was there, and it was all we had it all beautifully laid out and everything like this, and we were getting ready to start, and the sun was just going down over Galway Bay, which sounds terribly like a song, but anyway, it was, and it literally lit up all of the little locks and kind of riverways. Um, until it got to Galway Bay, and the sun kind of finally set in what we call the purple hour here, and we just looked at each other and we kind of said, "You can't follow that." You know, it was perfect, and we literally turned around, and there was a full moon over just pine trees and dark sky. And it was just, to this day, it was, you know, nature just basically said, you know, you think you can do a ritual, watch this. You know, you just couldn't follow it. It was brilliant, amazing.
So, what mountain is it that you were going up?
These are the Slivolti Mountains. Ours is a hill with attitude, because actually we are, I think it's something like 1,000 feet is, once you're over that, it's a mountain, but ours is like
In
900.
Ireland, it is.
Yes, ours is 960. So the only reason it feels like a mountain, firstly, is the roads up it tend to be at that angle, but also the land around is quite flat, going out along the Shannon and out into Galway Bay. So these hills really just come up quite steeply. But yeah, so ours isn't referred to. A few of the other hills are referred to, like the Irish name would be for mountain rather than hill. Like we're
Sliabh
not,
Look.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. We're not Beha, but a lot of them will be sleeve this or that, you know.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm.
Brilliant. So, what brought you to druidry initially?
Um, well, actually, if I was, I take a slight step back from that to kind of make it clear. But you know, since I was very young, I followed quite a sort of pagan attitude. I was always very spiritually focused, And I remember when I was, this is quite curious actually. I only worked this out recently, but when I was about 12 or so, I was off school for a reason, and I went walking my dog at the time with my mum. And we went off, this was down in the south of England, and we got to
Mhm.
this place called Viper's Hollow. Obviously, it's named after the adders, which is quite druidic now, I think back to it. But it was this tiny little wooded valley. It was a beech wood because I grew up on chalk. And we were sitting there, and she said the strangest thing, which to someone who was as intense and scorpionic as I am was just deadly. But she sat there and said, you know, this place has real magic in it. Years and years later, when I was reading Doreen Valiente's biography, I realized that my mum, like a lot of mums back in those days, would sit and listen to Radio 4. And Doreen Valiente had been on Radio 4 talking about the early days of Wicca and, you know, Gardnerian magic and things like that. And looking back, it was exactly around that time. She must have heard that talk to start talking about magic and spirit in the land. And we had this very curious conversation about it. And after that, you know, forever after that, I found my spirituality, particularly actually in that area, but in those woods, in those beech woods. And when I was a little bit older, you know, when I was in sort of 18, 19, I started my own group with some friends, and, you know, we would go up there for every festival and practice. And that was all under beechwoods. And so when we came over to Ireland and we traveled round, and I think Melanie might actually have told the story of how we found our house in her chat. But one way or another, we ended up in this beautiful house tucked away in East Clare. And we worked sort of together and solo, you know, very kind of quietly. We worked on the land, we worked with the land. And then, but you do find, having worked with groups, because I had my own group in the UK, and then when I met Melanie, she had a group she worked with. The groups kind of combined, and we worked that way for many years. And then when we came over here, working together, that kind of isolation was actually lovely. It worked very well for our kind of process. But you do miss the conversations, you miss the camaraderie and the things that you would talk about, the deeper issues that it's very hard to get to, talking sort of with people in the mundane, as it were. And then one day we started listening to podcasts, and of course Melanie heard Druidcast. And I came home and she said, look, you've got to listen to this. And I listened to it, and straight away I think we signed up for the course. And we just haven't looked back. It's, you know, that was just fantastic. It was really, I just think it hits so many perfect points for so many people. It doesn't matter where you're coming from to Druidry, because you make it, every person makes the journey their own journey, you know. But yeah, so I came to it through Dave the Bard, yet another person.
I want to see yet another person. That's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Because so you were living in Ireland when you joined the order.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I think my first memory of you and Melanie was you were holding the staffs as we entered or went through the tour for the tower or the entranceway to the tour at one of the ceremonies in Glastonbury.
Yes, that's right. We kind of, when we went to that one, I don't think that was probably the one before the 50th. Sorry, I'm looking over to Melanie because she's my memory. But and yes, we went along to that, and you know, Melanie is one of those people that will leap into life and sort of take part in everything, and I would be quite a bit more introverted. So we're going along there, and I'm like, right, don't volunteer for anything. We'll just go. We'll kind of watch. We'll see how. Don't volunteer for anything. 20 minutes in, we find we're Druid 1 and Druid 2 at the Avebury ritual, and we're doing the staffs for the tour ritual. So it was an experience, and it was brilliant, actually. I love the summer gatherings.
Oh, they're absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will have our summer gathering in 2022.
Yes.
And, I mean, we've been doing so much online. It's great to be able to have these chats, and hopefully these will continue. And these will continue. Well, everything willing. But it's just lovely to be able to meet physically as well. It's just to have that outdoor experience.
Yeah.
I suppose thinking of when we haven't had the outdoor, but that this pandemic and all of the restrictions that have brought us is teaching us or amplifying the importance, I think, of our inner work and being able to hold ritual within, and even through a medium like this, that we can create magic even in online. It's a really interesting, I suppose, not demonstration of it, that you can actually feel it and hold a ritual online in a way that I would have said was impossible, but actually is.
You really can, and it works. I mean, we have enjoyed every one of the rituals, and yeah, the energy is absolutely there, which is kind of strange. Because I think a lot of people that follow druidry, the the roots of their druidry are in the earth,
That's right.
and yet it has actually worked so well, and it's been a great addition to what we do anyway. I'm quite sure there's very few people in the order who haven't still gone out and done the things that they like to, that are important to them. But it's been wonderful to have that addition to it. Yeah.
Because I know, when we were, we were hoping to have the gathering and the installation ceremony in 2020. And then we said, okay, it'll happen in 2022 or 2021. And then Philip said, well, if it doesn't, sure, we'll do it on the Astral and we'll be able to hand it over. And that's exactly what happened.
Yes.
Because when I was sitting in my room, in the sitting room, the room next door, just watching the screen, well, actually I had my eyes closed. I could feel Philip passing it over to me. And I mean, even though that was all recorded and was done in bits, thanks to Dave and his magic, I hadn't heard the complete thing. And it actually felt it.
Yes.
And there was a friend in the room that said, I'm not a druid, but by God, I was there. I could feel it. I could see it. It was happening.
Yeah.
So that was really important for me, and was a very profound experience. Hannah says online has been ideal for me. Absolutely, Hannah. It's and Poppy says the same. Yeah, they've really, thanks to this technology, that this has been available for the members. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's funny actually, because especially for many of us that might actually be more introverted, I love going to things, events and stuff like that. But there are people that will love to get out there and circle dance and bang the drums, and you feel like saying the introverts meeting will be over there in that hedgerow. It's and so being able to have that online aspect of it, and to listen to have the time to listen to all these people, and it's been the conversations that we would never get around to having otherwise. So it's been fantastic.
Well, Pat has something to say. It's not really a choice between in-person and online for me. They feel like different things. In person is gorgeous with people you're close to. Online is great for meeting folk you wouldn't normally get to mix. And then she says, also, you can do it in your pajamas. Of course, Pat. So there are a number of introverts here reeling. Actually, Lisa says, and it's really interesting, if not for online, I would be a lot weirder. Online is a community like mine. Online has been perfect for me, as I don't have much choice living in Gibraltar, but I've met many brilliant people online. Thanks, Sandra, for that. The introverts meeting, that's Jamie. Yep. So it's And somebody loves your statement. The introverts will be over there on the hedgerow. So it's yeah. And then Brandy says online is like being in a great forest, for we're all connected. That's true. So it makes it possible. Joanna says location, work, kids.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're talking about if we were meeting, I haven't met you here in Ireland, apart from yes at Asia.
Yes.
But and the next time we meet physically, probably it would be nice if we did sooner, but it may not happen. We'll be in Glastonbury, and it'll be Wolf, Melanie, hugs, blah 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 blah. We must have a chat, and then we don't because there's so many people.
Yeah.
So I've really, really enjoyed my chats with people, and I've gotten to know people whom I've met before, but get to know them in another way. And it's really funny, and I think it's paradoxical that we're having a conversation of depth and intimacy on a public forum like this.
Yes. Yes.
And there's something it's fascinating for me that this is possible, and here we are having a conversation about this.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Asia, and do you remember at the last Asia we went to, Sugumi had come over from Japan? I don't know if you remember her, but basically Melanie and I kept in touch with her, and she's now, because as you know, I teach art, and she's a lecturer at one of the art colleges there now. And so the wonderful thing is she puts up all these amazing videos of interviews with Japanese artists, which I don't understand a word of, but I do look at the art. And so I've been, quite often I'll get in touch with her and say, look, I'm doing this in a class, what's that technique? How did they do that? And it's just the connections you make. You never quite know what connections you're going to make at things like these events, at the summer gatherings or at Asia. It's just fantastic. So yes, absolutely. Even despite myself, and it's out of my comfort zone, but I always come back. I always start these things thinking I don't want to go, and I always come back saying that was just amazing. I'm so glad I'm going next year. So yes.
Absolutely. So Poppy asked, can you repeat her name again?
Oh, Sugumi. Now I'm probably pronouncing it terribly, but it was Tsugumi, I think.
I remember her now. Yes. Oh, great!
Yes.
It's lovely that you've been able to follow her heart.
Yeah, and she's doing amazing stuff. But you see, again, we connected over the fact I saw her art, which in Japan they still very much teach a high level of skill in their artwork. So it's really refreshing to see.
And of course, you're an artist, so you're obviously a visual artist. Do you write any poetry or do any writings, or are you a musician?
I do. I write brilliant poetry. Unfortunately, no one else.
I hear laughter in the background.
I wrote a brilliant piece about treacle pudding in a can. But strangely enough, it just doesn't seem to other people's taste. I'm getting a red card. Okay. No. I am the death of poetry. I love. There are certain things, certain poems and things I love. I love poetic works. One of my all-time favorite books would be Khalil Gibran's The Prophet.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And funny with that, because the first time I read it and thought, oh, it's all right, bit sort of new agey. And then, when you reread it and you realize that the ship he's waiting for is the afterlife, and it's a life review and things like that, and the depth that builds into it. I've read it 4 or 5 times now, and I've probably bought best part of 20 copies to give away. So I love poetic works, and I do love some poetry, but no, I don't. I try to stay away from writing it for the health of other people. But no, and then I just think sometimes words are so powerful. It's things like, often because I teach a lot of young people in their teens, we'll often have a lesson where I'll talk about we'll compare some rap lyrics, because there are some brilliant lyrics in rap when it's done well, to someone like Kubla Khan, Coleridge's poem, which is one of my favorites. And just the meter of it and the pace of it can be great. So yeah, that there's real power in it, but it's definitely not a skill I have. No.
Well, there's a challenge here
Oh yeah.
from Danuta. Danuta's in Australia. No, no, I am the death of poetry. Now that is true poetic material.
Yeah,
So
very
we could
good.
put a challenge. That is, I am the death of poetry, and then it can be like I am the wind on the sea, and I am the. You can go. I am the death of poetry. So there you are. It's your first line.
Yes, that's it. I'll work on that one. It's got to beat my treacle pudding one. Um,
So, but you're also a visual artist, and I have two of your prints in my house, and I've actually got them hanging on a wall. I found some wall space. So, would you like to just show us some of your work?
yes,
And
you've.
just how,
Hmm,
what is it that inspires you? I mean, where do you get your imas? Where do you get
hmm.
your awen from?
Um, it's funny actually. I teach classes myself, and also I work with young people, and you'll often get these situations where even like on a staff day you'll be doing something creative and people will say to me, come on, you're the creative one, and usually whatever I create is the worst one in the room. So kind of ironically I don't actually feel very creative. So when I originally when we went for I'd always drawn, and if you just draw out of your head, what happens over the years is you end up drawing the same things because you kind of know you can do them all right. So your work slowly grinds to a halt and it doesn't become anything. And many years ago, without when Melanie and I first met, without remotely knowing where this was going to lead us, we decided to go along to adult ed night classes. And so Melanie, I think originally was going for pottery, and the pottery one was full, and there was one that was offering introduction to corn dollies. And so she said, "Oh well, I'll give that a go," because she loves the folklore. And so I looked down, and there was one on painting, and so I went to that course. And on the first night, the tutor said, "Right, just paint or draw something out of your own head." And there was me thinking, oh, this is great. I can really show my ability. And I started drawing. And then he said, right, add some color. And I think the only comment I got that night, because the class was a big class, was he came past about an hour in and just went, are you colorblind? Like that. I took that as a criticism. Um, and the tutor was a wonderful man called Jan Kotkowski, interesting artist himself, but his sense of humor, he was very arty, very modern arty, which I totally didn't get. And so I spent a few years learning painting with him, very, very amateur level still. And then we came over here, and a couple of things happened. One of the paintings I'll show you is actually linked to be honest with you, my art blossomed with the land here. Um, and it's always been a process for me. I'm afraid any art I do is 99% plodding and
Hmm.
just doing the work. Now, funnily enough, what I've been working on for the last 2 years, which I don't really have any examples to show, is more recently I went back and I did a course in traditional painting methods with oils. And in those methods, you layer the oils on, and they build up. Your average modern painting probably has about 3 layers on it, but if you do it this way, you can build up 20, 22, 24 layers. And that is such a perfect way to magically imbue work, because like with a knot spell, you're literally layering the magic layer over layer. And I kind of did this partly thinking, oh, maybe this is a bit in my own head. And I did a painting which I've called the Dark Lord. It's actually an antlered male figure in a woodland with the sun going down. Most of the picture is very dark, but we had a friend come up to visit, and I said, oh, pop into the room, you'll see I've literally just finished my painting. And she was sat there on the floor in front of it for half an hour. And I thought, oh, okay, that worked then. uh, you know um, hang on, do you have flurries of inspiration where you will paint loads and then it will calm again? Actually, yeah, this is something Jan taught me, that he said any artwork, the reason that artists produce stuff in, you will have a series of maybe between 6 and 12 paintings, is because it is kind of like these conversations. I'll do the first painting and someone might say that's lovely, but I will be aware of what I didn't manage to do with it. And it's this kind of puzzle that you work through over a series of paintings. And maybe your first one will be the best, maybe the middle one will be the best, but some of the paintings I love the most aren't my best paintings, but there's something where at some point it clicked and I made connection with something. It's the same way that you can walk through a woodland, but there'll be one tree that you will just find yourself brought to. The same happens with the production of art. But I used to be far more prolific, and now my paintings are taking longer and longer because I'm working into them, but I just do it for the love of painting. I'd be going a bit hungry if I was doing it for the money.
There are people now, yes, we're going to show the painting, we're going to show his work. But no, I'm interested. So when you're going to do some work, do you go out into nature? I mean, I'm not looking, you're going out to pay mountains, so you go out in front of the mountain, but do you have like some kind of meditative practice, a daily practice, or that you do to prepare yourself, or does it?
Yeah.
Are there some days where you don't do anything, or do you have like what do you call it? Like a discipline that you say, okay, from 8 a.m. or 9 o'clock till lunchtime, I'm painting, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I do find that I cannot sit down and think I've got 40 minutes, I'll do a bit of painting. I actually do need time. With a lot of my latest paintings, I do actually set up sacred space, because it is, as I said, I'm developing more into trying to imbue the painting in that way. So yes, I paint in sacred space. I have a candle lit, I have incense, and I work away, and it's a process, it's a conversation. On the other hand, sometimes if someone, if I get a piece of design work, I still tend to have incense and candles going, and music and such. But that is a process often where you sit down and you're just putting in the work to get it done to the best of your ability. So it does depend. But on my own work, yes, it's done inside in sacred space. Oddly enough, I don't paint landscape very often, and the reason is other than the one which we're going to show, when I look at the landscape, when I walk up over the mountain here and I watch the sunset, the idea of trying to mimic that in paste, almost it's not an insult, but you cannot capture that life and energy. I think you have to be there. Now there are artists that can capture that, and it's just not my skill set. So I find people and mythical scenes and ideas fascinating. I can't really go out and, yeah, if there's a beautiful scene, I just soak it up. I would find it so hard to paint it. I love the Japanese technique where they would walk meditatively through these places, often for weeks or months, and then it's almost like they'd soak up what they wanted from that, and then they would sit down in their studio space and paint it from their mind. And that to me is an act of worship. The ritual itself is an act of worship. So yeah, that's.
Franny says something here. I recently started wet on wet oil work. I'm a novice, but I like to be on my own to paint, and I love the idea of doing this in a sacred space.
Yes, and that wet on wet oil work, I've seen some amazing. Again, you'll find people doing that. They build, because you're building up layer on layer. You go so deep in the work of it. In a way, you actually don't need the sacred space because you'll create it in doing it. But it's lovely. It's a beautiful way to work.
Here's a question. I was going to ask you this myself because I have my own vested interest. Shanti says, have you ever considered creating an oracle or tarot deck?
You know what? To this day, well, actually, I'm wearing my Pamela Coleman Smith magician T-shirt there. The funny thing is, Melanie's written a book. Excuse me, may I talk about this? Sorry, Melanie's just, for those who weren't here when I spoke to Eimear earlier, Melanie is working away making corn dollies just the other side of the computer screen. So I just wanted to make sure this was okay. She's written a book sort of that links into the tarot in certain ways. And what I did was I did illustrations for each of the major arcana. But to be honest with you, they're illustrations of the story. Because again, for myself, I look at Pamela Coleman Smith's work and the depth in it, and I kind of feel my illustration is, it doesn't come close to what she did with those. I just absolutely love them. So it's tempting, but then again, where I started with a lot of art, I would do, again, I might take a subject and say, right, okay, and we need a hair here, and we need this there and that there. And to be honest with you, the druid decks and the plant oracle deck, they can't be beaten. They do exactly that. I'd just be repeating it. And I wouldn't be repeating it as well. So no, it took me a long time to find the flow of doing what works for me. So I don't think I'd ever do that. It's been done too well already.
I know this is your talk, but we're going to see your art. Poppy says, can we see what Melanie is making?
Oh, yes. So Melanie is making these horseshoes at the moment, woven wheat, corn dolly horseshoes. And actually what she's got drying behind me, can I show one of the things? So things like this, that's a triple glory braid. Triple glory braid. There you go. So that's what she's making at the moment.
I have one of both of those. I have the horseshoe and I have one of those.
Oh,
and they're absolutely beautiful. Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So Danuta says, I'm finding that it is more the case that I craft my life to fit my art rather than craft my art to fit my life. Awen and interweave and daily breathing. Do you have anything to comment on that?
Finding that I craft my life to fit my, I suppose I've been very blessed because I teach art. I get up in the morning, I go in to work, and for me, teaching art is about teaching everything else because everything informs art. I use that as I am completely shameless. Like today, I just got a massive, I think it's about a 6-foot map of the world. And we, under the guise of the fact it is kind of a drawing, we looked at that and we talked about the world and we spotted where things were, and we talked about our place within it and things, and I feel that what we think and our ideas and the things we care about, that always has to be the root. For me, that is the root of what real art is. I have a discussion with this with a lot of the young people, because my issue with college was the fact that they say he was born before his time. I don't think they'll ever say that about me. I think I was born about 100 years too late. So I went to college with all this modern art that for me felt so lacking in any spirit. And so I talked to them about the fact that for me, great art isn't about what's there on the canvas. It's how much of a springboard it becomes for you to think your own ideas, to develop, where does it take you on from there? And that, so yeah, I'm very lucky that art is as much interwoven in my life as, either way, it's, they inform each other permanently.
Now, are you teaching at second level or third level, or are you teaching privately, or what do you
Second level. It's a youth centre where some of the young people might have dropped out of school for different reasons. Some might be non-nationals. all sorts of different people. The variety is the absolutely glorious thing about working there. Just so many interesting. Well, I mean, let's face it. I think the reason I'm still working there is I learn more each day than they do. But yes, a lot of the young people I teach will be between 16 and 21.
Is this
And
youth reach?
yes, yeah.
Ah,
So
okay.
so
It's
we
very
do
different
we do
environment.
LCA and we do sort of QQI and things like that. And yeah, it's just brilliant. It's really fertile soil for kind of learning and sharing experiences and things. And then often when I'm doing my night classes, I then come home, have a quick dinner, go off in the evening to Galway and teach a class there for 3 nights out of the 7.
Okay, Poppy wants to know, do you teach privately?
Um, Well, at the moment, up until COVID and lockdown and all that, I was just so busy. I tended now my night classes were kind of private classes, so they were adult classes that would come along to those. And at the moment, we have got a foundation for a building that will eventually be a workshop. And because I, having done all this online stuff, I really had this idea of wanting to teach online as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it crosses so many boundaries. It's wonderful. But yeah, my night classes are sort of private art classes, and people come, and they all have their own different skill level, their own interests, their own way of painting, their own materials. So for many years, I was actually a jack of all trades and a master of none. It's only in the last few years that I ever really felt I begun to find my style, because I had to literally go into a class and be good at watercolor or be good at acrylic and then pick up some oil paints. And, so yeah, you end up being a jack of all trades for a long time.
Can somebody look up the completion of that statement, jack of all trades and master of none, and then far better than this than master of one or something? Yes, something like that. Would somebody look it up? Because there's a lot to be said for having those general skills within anything, to be a polymath, and it's
Mm.
not about excellent at all of them, but to be able to do that. And of course, I think as a teacher, if you're excellent at only one medium, what about the students that you have who that medium doesn't talk to? So I
Yeah.
imagine when you have your studio that maybe there's a possibility that you'll be teaching online. So anyone, Poppy, maybe you'll
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I love working through this, because also you'll find with a lot of people, once people are busy, lost in something, you can talk in a way that might feel uncomfortable otherwise. You have these kind of conversations that just don't happen normally. And I do have a somewhat intense character, so yeah, I just love that kind of thing.
Okay, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Danuta.
I didn't know that at all. It's just one of those expressions I've heard. That's fantastic.
And I think there are many languages that have that derogatory statement about being a master of none. But I love this, and oftentimes better than a master of one. So Poppy says, let me know. So and when you're going to go online, and then Amanda from the US would be delighted to have online classes.
Wonderful. Oh, that'd be great.
So, okay, well, listen, I know people are wanting to see your work, so maybe we'll start to do this. Okay, so you can guide us through this.
Oh yeah. So like I said, I was a long time learning with a lot of work. And one of the things that really did inspire me at the beginning was Chinese and Japanese style painting. And Indian ink, which I believe was entirely wrongly named because it came from the East and people didn't know any better, so they called it Indian ink. But I believe it's always come from places like China and Japan. You just can't get any blacker, as you can see from the eye of the hair there.
Beautiful.
So a little while, basically, I went through college, and one of the things, saying about jack of all trades, one of the things that most people, because I went to a mature student, and a lot of the kids coming in from school, what really threatened them was, as they'd got to the end of school, they had been the one well known at school for being good at art. And it's like, oh, you're good at art, and it became something they were. And then they go into a class where there's going to be at least 10 people better than them. And they found it hugely intimidating. It really knocks the confidence. I fortunately, going in as a mature student, I loved it. I loved that
Mm.
element of learning off my peers, off the other guys in the class, and seeing what they did, their experimentation, their interest in it. But towards the end, the weight of this kind of modern take on art, the modern artist, which is far more talknique rather than technique, just destroyed my love of painting. And by the time I left college, I just couldn't think of anything I wanted to paint or do. It killed my kind of drive for a couple of years. And then I started the OBOD course and went into the Bardic grade. And, I would run screaming rather than ever sing anything in front of anyone. And actually, they would run screaming too. But so I realized as I went through the Bardic grade that it's what helped me start again. And so I started with black and white. I started with very simple techniques and just this Indian ink. And what I love about the Indian ink, there's a couple of things. One thing is, if you make a mistake, you cannot get rid of it. It's there. So I would start with these paintings. I would have about 4 little jars of Indian ink getting increasingly dark in color. And you just start with the light stuff. So the first one I did was actually the hair. And I drew this one out and I started working on it. And as I developed it, I looked at this and I said to Melanie, I said, no, I'm going to have to bin this one. The eye's too big. And Melanie said, no, the eye makes it. And and you know what? It sold more than any other painting I
I
did.
have it too.
Yes. And to this day, I look at it now and I think, yeah, I love it. I really enjoyed doing it because it was such a surprise. So after I did the hair, I was thinking about sacred animals that are sort of indigenous to these lands. And one term, it's actually off a guy called Gordon White. What's his podcast? Rune Soup. He referred to England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland as the Western Archipelago of islands. And I thought that's lovely because obviously I've come from England over to Ireland. My contact with the land has been, it's the same land, the same way you talk to it and touch it. So basically, I started looking at the kind of the animals that have been sacred animals within these lands. So the druid's bird, the wren, was the next one to be done. And again, that's probably about the closest I get to painting nature most of the time, was to suggest it. I love the work of John William Waterhouse, what he does with nature. And he, because he puts it there, but it's almost ephemeral. It's subtle. You almost feel it in yourself. But anyway, so that was the druid's bird and the hare. If you move on to
You want me to do that? I can.
So working along on the animals, I mean, obviously living where I do, for a start, there's a lot of cattle bred around here, and I was thinking about the fairy cows with the black-tipped horns. That's like an old Irish breed, I think. It's years since I painted these, but because of the way I am, as I said, it's that difference between someone who just has this intuitive creativity. When I sat down to paint a bull's head, I painted a bull's head in the middle of a sign, and it just looked like it was a sign for a coffee shop or something. There was nothing to it. So I ended up doing, now these are 2 pictures, by the way, just placed together on the slide, in case someone thinking that I'm far more modern than I am. So the bull one literally is, I just took half the head, and that was the sort of size painting. and that was very much about the fairy cows and things like that. Yeah, and again, the Indian ink, just the blackness you can get is just beautiful, but it has to go on last. And then they've been breeding eagles, no, hen harriers, and sort of they've had eagles up around our way here. And of course, funny enough, when we first came over to Ireland, we went along to Celt World at, I think it was in Tralee, Tramore, and they were telling the old Irish tales, and they had Amagan's story, but part of it was told by an eagle shape in the floor, and it was actually just a helicopter view flying over Ireland in this shape. But again, it's something I've always associated with that view of the world from above. So I did the eagle next. So that was my ink painting. Just a case of building those up in different shades, and I love drawing. I love black and white work.
And you saw that little thing I put up. You have an eye for the eyes, and
Yes.
I mean that strikes me. At first, when the first thing with the bird is, oh my God, look at that eye, and then I see the beak, and then I'm looking at the cow, and I see the horn, and then I see, oh my goodness, that eye just draws me in. It's just magical.
Yes, they they really are the windows to the soul.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So what was next?
Okay, let me see.
Oh yeah. So after that, I begun to build on my drawing a little bit. Now, funnily enough, Lou Lavada on the left, and would you say I'm pronouncing that right? Lou Lavada?
You love other.
Lavada, okay. Funnily enough, that was a charcoal drawing done in a life drawing session. And the guy was just sat there. He was actually wearing a hoodie, and the drawing kind of worked out in one morning, almost to the level you can see there. And I kind of just felt he had this very Celtic warrior look, so I changed the hoodie into a cloak.
Beautiful.
And added the spear.
I love the Tara brooch as well.
Yes, yes, and that's. I love the way with a lot of the old kind of Victorian painters, because they were in the process of robbing the world, they would say, "Okay, let's make this one look Roman. What have we got in the grab bag?" And they'd pull out some antiques and they'd go into the painting. But yeah, so that one worked out very nicely, and I decided I wanted to do some more, and I did the second one about Ellen of the Ways. She was one of the horned goddesses that Melanie had a friend who was very much it's Caroline, wasn't it? Caroline Wise.
Yes.
Who she was very much into her. And but I must admit, again, this is where I'm slightly unoriginal. I completely robbed a old black and white photograph of James Joyce's daughter as my model for Ellen of the Ways. So but it was just such a striking image. I decided to do that as a charcoal drawing. So these again is part of the technique where I just started layering charcoal. This is actually using pan pastel from I order it in. I used to order it in from America because you could only get it from there originally, but it's a really soft kind of charcoal pastel mix, and it's beautiful for working with like this.
Oh, lovely. Fascinating. Well, you're inspiring people to take up charcoal again.
Good.
So wonderful. Just wonder, Poppy asked, is with your ink, is it ink on paper that you do?
Yes. Now, what I do is I get quite a heavy print paper. And the best way to do that is actually to get it through arrangement with an art college, because when I was in the art college, I'd go down to the print department and they would have this lovely thick paper, which will really soak up the ink. And it would cost about €1 a sheet. And so then I went to order it from my local art shop, and it was going to cost €30 a sheet. But the funny thing was, I was doing a painting on one of these sheets one day, and of course we live in a tiny little cottage. There are 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. The the one of the rooms upstairs has been split in two into a bathroom and a spare room. So anyway, I'd been painting this painting of Scylla. Scylla and Charbadis, the monster in the whirlpool in Greek myth. So anyway, I'd been doing this painting, and I'd left it up on our living room floor to dry. And there was I'd asked a guy to come and visit to let me know, to give me a quote on putting some Velux windows in because the house is so dark. And so he comes in his boots and he stomps up the stairs and he walks straight onto my painting. And when I said to him very politely and calmly, I said, "Would you mind moving? You're standing on my artwork." He kind of did this little pirouette in muddy boots and then stepped off it. So because it was on this lovely thick printing paper, and when I draw in waterproof pen, and I was using Indian ink. So I then put it in the bath and gave it a scrub in water to get all his boot prints off. Managed to save it that time, and then sometime later, when I was doing a lot of stippling, which is just dotting. When I was doing the face, it went horribly wrong, so I then had to take sandpaper to it and redraw it. So the paper is incredibly resilient. At some point, I'll look it up, and I can always let you know, Eimear or something, or someone can email me and I'll let them know what the paper was. But yeah, it's just really good solid paper.
So Lisa says, I've tried the Stephen Reddy technique, permanent India ink and India ink washes, then watercolor over that, not watercolor paper, but something suited to ink. The India ink tones down the colors in a beautiful way.
Wow. Yeah, you see, I must admit, it's the blessing and the curse of the internet is for anyone who works art, you get really pleased about something. Then you go on the internet and see that there's 1,000 people doing it 10 times better than you. But this is what I love about it, because someone will say, "Oh, have you tried that technique?" And yes, it's just, there's so much to discover, and that sounds beautiful, actually. I'm not brilliant at color, especially, I mean, I do a lot of watercolors. I've done a lot of them for design. And I would say that I feel very critical about my use of color. It doesn't have the subtlety that someone who's really good at that manages. But yeah, so that sounds an interesting technique.
Okay, so will we move on?
Yes. So basically, I wanted to move on to something. Well, I love George Russell's writings. I love his watercolor. Again, he's the reason I don't paint watercolors sort of professionally, because when I look at his watercolors, he was someone so in touch with the Fae, so in touch with the spiritual realm, that he manages to create a painting with almost no color in it, so I wanted to do a series of work on the sort of Irish writers, the Celtic revivalists, Renaissance, I suppose. So I did a series of these. I've put 3 up, but George Russell, AE, was the first one I went to, because he also just has a spiffing beard, and I work in stippling with a tiny little pen. I mean, literally, I'll be 3 hours so lost in dotting the drawing, and I was going to stain it with tea or coffee. I thought tea would be particularly Irish, to kind of use. But in the end, I realised that I couldn't keep the colour quite general enough with the tea. And also I'm bad enough for having a cup of tea and my painting water next to each other, frequently taking a drink of the wrong one. So, so in the end, I used watercolor for these. But this was one of AE's poems, and it's about the sacred well. And so yeah, that was a lovely one to start with. I don't know if you can see the writing in that, but it says, "And when the sun sets dimmed in eve and purple fills the air, I think the sacred hazel tree is dropping berries there, from starry fruitage waved aloft where Connla's well o'erflows. For sure the enchanted waters run through every wind that blows. And I've got the Ogham for hazel in the tree there, just the little branches off to one side. I think it's four marks to the left. Anyway, so yes, so that was one of the ones, and I did a series of these.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so obviously
this one is.
This is the one that people would know. This was actually the first one, and my funny thing was my mum had been taken ill, and she'd had to move into a home. And so I'd gone to visit her when she'd come out of hospital, went back over to England, and that was where I just had a little picture of WB Yeats on my iPad. And because I was sitting with her for a fair few hours, and a lot of the time, you know, she wasn't really up to chatting much. And it's actually her who inspired me to start drawing in the first place. So I just sat there and started doing this sketch of WB Yeats. And that was actually what began the series, was this drawing. And of course, I quoted the famous line of his there, and did a picture to match.
Beautiful. There's some questions here that I don't want to let go, so I'm going to just pause on the exhibition for a minute. Danuta says, what do you feel is the power of offhand comments of teachers in directing our exploration as artists? How has that worked in your life?
The power of offhand comments of teachers. Well, you know what? Something struck me about college that was completely the wrong way round. The people who did the worst in college went on to teacher training, which kind of suggests that the worst artists are the ones you're getting as art teachers, which isn't how it should be. Now, they're not. You know, I would say with a lot of the ones I saw go on to that, like me, they just didn't really fit into the modern art kind of ego money selling. You will see a lot of modern artists these days will mimic scientists. You know, in their studio, they'll be wearing a lab coat. A lot of the art is presented almost as if it's science. And then, like Mr. Ben, there'll be an instant clothes change and they're a salesman. And as I said, the talknique comes in.
I love that expression, talknique.
Yes. Actually, in my first year, I was painting away, and this guy, he was a great artist. He was using all the old Renaissance pigments. And he came round, he was in his fourth year, and I'm absolutely terrible at names. So I think his name was Steve, but then again, could have been anything. And he took a look at my work and he said, wow, he said, you really love drawing. And I said, yes, I do. He said, you're going to hate it here. And he's the one who said, you won't be learning technique, you'll be learning talknique. But he went on to say that what you'll really learn, you'll learn from the students around you. And he gave me the greatest piece of advice. He said, always go to the technicians in a college. And I learned a ton of painting techniques from the guy who was a technician. You know, you'd think he's just there to supply the paints, but he was a great artist in his own right. And he'd be the one that would look at your work and say, why don't you try applying the oil in this way and things like that? So, but going back to the question about offhand comments, I think I was smathering away, good Irish word, at my canvas one day and getting nowhere very fast. And a lady came past, and she used to have most of the students in tears. She was a fierce critic. And she came past and she looked at what I was doing and she said, you know, she said, that brush you're holding is a tool. It's not a stick to get the paint from your palette onto the canvas. And although she could be cutting like that, when she walked away, I thought, you know, that's right. I'm not using it like a multi-tool. I'm not using it in different ways. I'm just using it to carry paint. So sometimes the most critical comments are actually useful. But when I teach, and again, I'm often teaching young people who've had a bad experience in school with art. I find there's two things. The first thing I do is you make sure that the first drawing or painting someone does is something they'll love. Because the minute they have enthusiasm, they can do anything. And that's the bottom line. It's a bit. I played piano. Well, I nearly murdered a piano for 4 years. I think my first year and a half was literally doing the C scale, and that's if ever my teacher was a chain smoker who would snap the lid on your fingers if you look down. And after 4 years, I realized not only do I hate piano, but the piano hates me. And I should be brilliant at it because, as someone once said, I've got loads of CDs. I really love piano music. But, no, I think with anything like that, you need to love it first. You need to have that enthusiasm, because then when it goes wrong, you'll think, okay, how do I make this as good as the one I did before? So yeah, that's where it comes from. Just a love of what you're doing and patience.
But I also think if you're nervous and insecure, and a critical comment from a teacher can knock that, and it takes the pleasure out of it.
Yes.
Where I remember being in Caimabon in Wales on an OBOD retreat with Philip, Stephanie, and Penny and Arthur, and part of these retreats there's always some craft element, and this is where Stephanie comes in, and we were invited to make shields, and I did a hair, but
Brilliant.
I was painting oak leaves, and I'm not a painter, even though I've been in art groups. I work with textiles much easier. Painting and drawing just intimidates me. But
Right.
I remember Stephanie saying, if you try this, just shade it a little bit. She says, do you see how the leaf comes out of the page? And I go, oh my goodness. And that's all she needed to do was she was very encouraging, but she says, just try this.
Yeah.
And that shield is in my camper van. And I look at that and I go, I'm amazing. I mean, no other artist would think that. But for me, and I can see the leaves, they stand out on this shield.
Yes.
And that was just that little bit of encouragement, and that little, okay, she's teaching me a technique in the gentlest of ways. And she was also very clear. And so thank you, Stephanie, if you're ever watching this. I really appreciate that, because that's my magnum opus and the only one, But it's that having somebody encouraging, particularly when you feel intimidated.
Yes. And to show you, sometimes, just a single technique is a bit like someone giving you the first tool for your toolbox. And when you then look at your next piece and you think, well, I can actually do that bit, and you start to see what you can do on it. It's a case of giving people, I mean, it's, again, this is why I love doing what I do. There's one lady who comes to my night classes. She's been coming to them for 21 years, as long as I've been doing them. And every autumn term, she does a set of individual Christmas cards for her family. Now, they have this heirloom of 20 Christmas cards personally painted for them, with dedications on the back, because we print them then and she sends them out. And then she wrote a book of her poetry and illustrated it herself as well. But to me, looking at that kind of work, which has such a depth of meaning in it, is 1,000 times better than me looking at some piece of, bent metal on the roadside that is art that people have actually paid for, that means nothing to me. So, and no, I just love the depth of meaning and the contact that can be in work that really has honesty to it, integrity to it.
That's beautiful. Amanda has a comment.
Hmm.
I'd love to hear how you approach intimidating aspects of your art, whether it be a subject you may be unfamiliar with, or a section of texture, etc., that pushes your skill set and takes you out of your comfort zone. Is that enjoyable for you, and how do you handle mistakes?
No, there's tears, there's tantrums. No, there isn't, honestly. It's, yeah, that's interesting. I suppose in a funny sort of way, every piece of art I do takes me out of my comfort zone to an extent, because it's always a journey. I don't like to, because I spent my early years repeating the same stuff over again, and I'm actually the same with ritual in this way, that I don't get comfort in that sense from repeating something that I know I can do. That becomes stale very quickly. So with all of my art, on the one hand, it always takes me out of my comfort zone. But on the other side, who am I trying to kid? The fact that I'm spending hours in my own head creating something absolutely is my comfort zone. But I suppose what I'm saying is there is always a challenge in what I do. And one of the best things I have is Melanie, because we're both craft workers. Having that second pair of eyes, when you've been working at something for hours, you cannot see the mistakes.
Yeah.
So Melanie will often come down and she'll look at something and I'll say, I'm finished. And that actually means I'm sick of it. And she will say, that eye doesn't look quite right, or that bit isn't there. And there's a part of me that wants to say, no, it's perfectly fine, it's finished. But no, that's what you need. And actually, with my art classes, there are people there that paint the most amazing paintings. And the only skill I'm really bringing to them is that second opinion. I'm coming past fresh eyes and looking at it saying, you know what, actually, that needs a bit more color or whatever. And they just produce amazing stuff. I mean, Portumna, where I teach now, we worked out the other day when we had our celebration of 20 years. I think it was something like 3,500 paintings had come out of that group over the years, and they're all over the world, and they're all personal. They are paintings that people cared about and created through their own time. So yeah, it's just amazing. But I think the challenge is integral. It's important. Otherwise, it's just production.
Gabriella says, I learned the theory and the techniques in school. I feel grateful for doing that so young, yet it did make me stop for a few years.
Yeah.
It wasn't the techniques, but the people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of art comes out of moments of silence. It comes out of personal time. And, if you're the only one that likes it, it's still wonderful art because it's a process it is like creating a ritual. At the end of the ritual, when everything's cleared away, you're the one carrying that energy. And I feel it's the same with art. You carry that power. And sometimes, as we found with the internet, that power can cross over to other people. But yeah, it's a process. And I think that's important.
and Jamie says there's a difference between critique and criticism. Absolutely. A difficult thing that artists deal with the moment their work is shared. Some teachers should not be teachers. The damage is real. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny. The first art teacher that made me want to paint was a born again Christian young teacher when I was about 10, called Mr. Newman. He was a born again Christian. But again, his interest in what people were doing, and I could have been headbutting blue paint onto my canvas for all for all he cared. But he just had that inspiration. And then I went on to secondary school, and quite frankly, not only did the art teacher couldn't care less, but the entire year failed. I failed my art O level, had to retake it in a day. And yeah, that stopped me painting for 8-10 years, so yes, the damage is very definite.
So will we go on to
Yes.
our next painting?
Yes.
Ah,
Mr. Oscar.
Oscar. Yes.
So yes, with his sumptuous coat. Yes, and now actually I had a problem. I felt that Oscar Wilde had to be there, obviously. I had to be careful with the images because they have to be over 70 years old to be acceptable for copyright.
Okay.
So some people were saying, oh, would you do Seamus Heaney? No, I couldn't, because also I couldn't easily get permission. I don't know, I didn't. Well, not being Irish either, I figured I probably wouldn't get permission. But so I wanted to do Oscar, and then I looked at his work. It was so hard to find a neat, short, quotable bit of poetry. But this one, I can't remember if this was actually about his sister, but it's tread lightly, she is near, under the snow. Speak gently, she can hear the daisies grow. All her bright golden hair tarnished with rust, she that was young and fair fallen to dust.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I did the Celtic cross with it. And I just felt that really just cuts to the heart of who Oscar Wilde was, for all his affectations.
That's right.
There was such depth in what he had to say.
That was really moving. Just
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah, so
Oh,
this is funny. This is me, in a way, when you talk about design, many years back, basically, I was asked very kindly by a lady that ran the local hospice that she wanted to renew the place and she wanted to name the wards after holy wells. She felt the idea of the healing waters, the kind of that root of Irish culture, something that's so close to the hearts, especially of the older people. So she said to me, would I do a series of paintings of the holy wells? Now, I must admit, I would have loved to have done this as a gift at the time, but we had no running water in our house as it was. When we bought our house, it was a stone shell with a roof. It had no windows, it had no door, no electricity, it had no running water, no sink, no toilet, nothing. So each morning I would have to fetch our water in 2 buckets from an acre down the field. And Melanie, like between the two of us on wash day, you were just walking up and down the hill endlessly to wash the clothes. She'd be out in the field with the soap board, and I'd be supplying water. So it was a tough time. So if someone said, would you paint this? Would you paint that? Yes, absolutely. But it was a pleasure to do this. So what we did was we travelled round East Clare looking for holy wells. This one is actually tucked away behind the AIB bank, I think it was, in Killaloe. And what happens is you go into the bank, preferably not with a mask on, and you say, will you let me through to the back? It sounds like a really polite bank robber. But what they do is they take you through, and there's a garden behind the building, which no one would normally see. And there's this holy well. And we got there, and there was this sheen and a gig just propped against
I
the side.
noticed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a real solar wheel one, because the other hand is under the leg and one hand's over the leg, so it's like the Bridget's cross symbol. But yes, there was this beautiful sheen and a gig just propped against it. We said, oh, sheen and a gig, and they were like, oh, is it? Okay, off you go. Let us know when you want to come back out again. So I did a series of these, and each of the wards was named after the holy well. I'd assume they're still hanging there. So yeah, that was lovely to do. But in the process, we travelled around, and each time we visited the well, we would clean it and then bless it, and then I'd go away and I'd paint it.
Beautiful. Absolutely exquisite.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And yeah, this is another holy well. There's only 2 of them I put up here. This one was actually struck by a van the other day because it's on the road from Scariff into Ennis near Tuamgraney. And I think that's actually an altar, what do you call it?
A water font.
Yes, on the outside. But anyway, it's a beautiful stone well. And again, the water inside is beautifully clean and pure. I remember many years ago, I went to an event on the Burren with Starhawk. And her particular thing she was doing was she was talking about about water and purity of water and the importance of water. And she said Ireland was the only country she'd been to when she said, does anyone actually have any water that has come from a well? And suddenly everyone just held up their bottles and, they'd all brought them all from their own wells. And she said, only in Ireland, it's anywhere else, it's kind of plastic bottles that they've got from the store. So yeah, they're painting the holy wells and looking at them was just fantastic. And it helped me to make some kind of contact with the real lifeblood of the land.
That's beautiful.
So this is actually, so the one on the left is where I used to have to fill the buckets. This is down in a field below our house. And basically those 3 stones are where the water comes spilling down from about 3 different streams, and you could wedge a bucket under it. Now, the odd thing was, and it's all bluebells and everything, the odd thing was that in the summer, this particular spring would never dry up, but you could be there for half an hour waiting for the bucket to fill. So after many weeks of trudging down there to get our drinking water, I thought, I might as well paint it. I'm here so long. And this was the first oil painting that I ever really did, that I finished, that I was proud of. The ones I'd done in England, were very amateur pieces that I was just learning the ropes with, and I just didn't, I didn't get there with them. So this one now, the crazy thing with this is I've lost it. I think it's somewhere up in my attic somewhere, but I actually don't know where. This was painted on acrylic paper, so it like a card. It wasn't painted on canvas. We just didn't have the money for anything. I happened to have a piece of acrylic card left from when we'd moved over. So yeah, I don't actually know where this is, but it's up in our attic somewhere. And the funny thing was with the water, never having painted nature like this, the lovely thing about oils was I would paint the water and it didn't work, so I could scrape it off. And in the end, what I did was I painted the stream bed, and then I painted the water over the top of it. And I always joke that this is actually mixed media, because I couldn't get over how black my blacks were on it. And then I realized we'd moved an old broken range into what was going to become the kitchen so we could cook. Because when we were first here, we literally had 2 stones and a piece of tin that had fallen off the roof in the fireplace that I would cook on. And so we moved an old range in, which used to belch smoke and fill, so if you lit the range, you had to open the door and all the windows. And I realized that this painting was actually, I think it's got as much soot as oil paint worked into it over the years. I eventually, when I'd finished it, I gave it a wipe over with a cloth, and it was like a whole new painting. But yeah, so that was my painting of the landscape. But you see, I think I had a real connection with the spirit of the spring there, so it worked for me. It's incredibly hard to work with the spirit of a place like that.
It's quite magical. I can just see my eye being drawn into behind those 3 stones, but then you seem to have another doorway above it, and it's like, oh, you could walk right into that painting, and that's just looking at it on screen.
Yes, yeah, it worked beautifully. And I know that if my art teacher had been looking at me, he would have said, that tree, which was actually a tree where the ivy had snapped it and pulled it down again, and he would have said, look, that's not aesthetically pleasing, you should take that out. But this is where I joke about lack of imagination. I just painted what was there. Nature had kind of done. Yes. And then the one on the right was part of this my technique that I've been building on. That's a Da Vinci painting, which I've always loved, but I was just learning to layer the oil paints and work into it to get depth. This is lady with an ermine, which of course in England or Ireland would be called woman with a weasel. Not quite as but the interesting thing was, when I had gone through this, I'd started doing a lot of design and I was getting lots of work, but your heart can't get into things. When someone says produce this, you can do it, and that's fine, but it's an exercise of production. So Melanie said to me, she said, if you really want to start to work into your paintings, you need to create a sigil. And that's because at the time I was doing black and white paintings in the Chinese and Japanese style, a lot of their black and white work would be finished off with a red stamp, that signed in that way. So I created a sigil for the artist I wanted to be. We did a magical kind of ceremony. Once we'd created it, we sort of set that up, and that's actually my logo for my business cards as an artist. And now I sign each of my paintings with the sigil rather than a signature. And if it's something where I can't do that, it goes on the back of the canvas where it can't be seen.
So where is it?
So down the bottom of the lady with an ermine, you'll see a circle with some lines and marks in it.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm using my mouse. Can you see my mouse? No,
no,
I
no.
can see. Okay, it doesn't
Um,
show.
but
Okay.
also, I mean, on my, if anyone wants to, they can look on my website. And
Actually, while you're just talking, I'm going to type in the website so everybody can.
oh yeah,
What is your website?
it's just www.wolflorien.com.
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay.
Yeah, I need to do more work on it. It's Melanie, who always said she was completely technophobic, created the most amazing website herself, and updates it constantly. And it always makes me feel a little guilty because I get to mine about twice a year. But it does have examples of the work I've done on it. Yeah.
I've just had this message. Having trouble connecting. Please check your internet connection. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Pat, would you put in wolflorien.com? It's just that I wanted to put it on all of them because there's 4 channels this is going out on. For some reason, it's not working.
Okay.
But to get back to your nature one with the well,
Yes.
is Pat said, a number of people, I see 2 faces, one above the 3 stones. There are a number of faces in that painting. So that's really interesting.
It's funny you say that because when I was at college, in a desperate attempt to get some kind of spirituality into my work, because that really is like a curse word at art colleges, I did a painting of a angel statue from Highgate. And the idea of the painting was what I did was I painted dozens of faces, people talking, flowers, but I layered over them with a darkness. So in the end, what you saw was an angel on a pathway with some of the tombstones. But as you looked into the painting, you'd suddenly think, oh, hold on, that's a flower or that's a face. And it worked beautifully. And I've always wanted the time to repeat that experiment. But yeah, so, and yeah, I find this, I mean, we've dry lined most of our house with wood. And there's barely a day goes by before one of us is sat there saying, do you see the antlered deer?
Somebody
Or do
else.
you see the seal? Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of part of, and again, that's what I love about Waterhouse. He did the painting The Magic Circle, which is one of my favorite paintings. And when you look in the background, there's these caves that appear to have a figure in them. But again, it's just that level of hinting at something without having to make it so obvious that it's just painted in, you know?
Lovely.
But, yeah.
I can see why it's the YouTube. I can't post on YouTube. It's only gone on the Facebook one. So for those of you who are on YouTube, it's www.wolflorien.com. So I've tried twice, but it went on Facebook.
Great.
That's wonderful. Okay, Salve says incorporating a sigil also is very special in also weaving in your heart intentions. And I know I have a friend, Sherry, when I first met her, she's an artist in many ways, and she uses textiles, and she used to make big flags and create stuff for carnivals.
Mm.
But when she would be sewing stuff, there'd be little pieces she would sew in, and each one had a prayer. And I'm always fascinated how people, what a sacred art act. And I know Melanie does, because when she's made things for me, she's put intentions, prayers, or whatever. And I think it's just so beautiful to be able to weave that into your creativity.
Yes. Yeah. I think I really couldn't do it without, but now, because, you know, I got to a point where I realized you can go into art, you can go the professional route and essentially chase the money, or you let it be and you paint for the love of it. Now, some people are very lucky they get to do both. There's some amazing artists.
Mm-hmm.
The atelier system, which has really taken off in America, Juliet Aristides and people like that, David Cassan, do these just stunning work, absolutely stunning work. But yeah, I think for me, I got to this point where, because I teach, that gets food in the cupboard. So I'm able to paint for the love of it, but also because Melanie and I, you know, are such a team, we tend to enthuse each other. So, you know, she'll be working some magic into one of her corn dollies, or a spell, or a talisman, or one of her charms. And half the time, you know, that might make me think, oh wow, actually, yeah, I could do that with such and such, and those ideas just bounce off each other. And that's and that's actually, that's what I find from OBOD and from listening to these talks. There is such a richness with the members, and what they do and what we hear from them, that I think that that's what we missed when we first moved here. You know, you can still do all the magical ritual, you can do all those things, you can be in touch with the land, and we really were, because with no electricity in the house, we have a fairy fort up the road, and we saw so many strange things. Now it's died back a bit, because of course the minute you switch your electricity on, you've got a ring main around your house. And I can feel when our electricity goes off if we get a power cut. And that definitely, that changed the amount of sightings we had here of strange figures and faces in the hedgerow and things like that. But yeah, that creativity, being able to bounce ideas off each other, is a wonderful part of it.
Yeah, I remember talking to an OBOD member years and years and years ago, and she said she got lights for her garden,
Mm.
and she had them dotted around the garden, and she was really, really thrilled. And the first evening, she heard this voice. Turn out those bloody lights. And she looked around and she saw nobody, and she got rid of them. And since then, I have never been able to put lights in the garden unless I'm putting night lights to light people in the dark when we're going out to our grove for, say, at Samhain and at the solstice, so that they don't trip and fall.
Yes.
But I've never been able to. People have garden lights, you know, in their garden. I can't do it, simply because she told me that, and I feel no, can't do it. I can't do it. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I mean, when we turn our lights off, like often, because obviously, you know, Melanie particularly, you know, because I'm working, so I get up at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm off, and I do my work and stuff like that, which is strange, because there's me going on about I'm the unsociable one, but my work is quite social. Whereas Melanie now is very much working, you know, integrally with her magical work. So, for instance, you know, she'll wake up at 3 in the morning and see the moon and decide, time to bless all those things I've made. And off she'll go out. And of course, because we are in the countryside, there's no street lighting, there is no light pollution, and we don't have any lights out. So when you step outside, if it's full moon, it's like daylight under a filter. And if it's darker the moon, you'll walk into the edge of the house without knowing it's there.
That's right.
And it's beautiful. You know, that's it. That is. And I remember when we were working on the house at the beginning, Melanie was painting some of the wood we'd put up somewhere, and you know, we still had no electricity, and she said she heard these bare feet just kind of slap their way, just come into the kitchen behind her, and she just said over her shoulder, she just said, look, you're welcome here as long as you mean no harm. And they padded out, and that was it. You know, and things like that were, you know, happen, I think, when the power goes off. But yeah, it's I think the light story is probably it sounds very, very similar to experiences we would have had.
Yes.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
have we got another one? We do. This is our last one, is it?
Yes, this is the last one. Yeah. So, funnily enough, what I've done is, because I work with a lot of young people, each year I try to say to a couple of them, guys, let me do a portrait. I'll do it for free. I keep the original. I give them a copy of it. I also put a digital copy over at the printers so they can get as many as they want. And a copy goes up in the center. So we have this array over the last kind of 10 years since I've been doing it, of some of our students through the years. Now, the middle one was actually one of my students. Came in one day and he just said, look, this is my niece, you've got to do that. So you know, that was kind of a commission. The girl on the right, we often have a lot of the Roma in the center, and they're just fantastic. There's such a richness to the music that comes in, the discussions that come in. We'll have usually what we'd often find in a class, we might have sort of a third might be local settled people, a third might be travelers, a third might be Roma. And so this girl had said to me, okay, would you do a portrait? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And normally I would have just snapped a picture in the classroom, said, does that look okay? But no, she said, no, I'll get a picture. Evidently, I think her hair took about 3 hours to do. And when she brought the photo in, I didn't recognize her. Honestly, I wouldn't have known who this was. But she was just what, great student. And Benji, he's the guy on the left there. Again, real character, great big tall guy, and really great sense of humor. And you'll just occasionally get someone that says, yeah, do this. And so I just settle down with their picture and with a 2H pencil, which is quite a hard lead, and just work away and get lost in it. And it's a bit of contact. It's a bit of nice to give something. When Blazina, the girl on the right, when she got her picture, she was so delighted. She went over to the print shop and got an A0 version of it.
Ooh,
that went home. So yeah, it's just again, that's just a bit of the getting back to the pencil drawing. So I put that on at the end.
And again, I'm struck with the eyes. So when I look at the guy on the left, it's like, wow. And then I see the woman on the right.
Yeah.
And then the girl, the little one in the middle.
Yeah,
it's like,
actually.
What color are her eyes? It's almost like she's darker skinned, but her eyes must be pale green. I don't know, but it's just incredible. They are absolutely magical.
I think children of that age carry, it's almost like their spirit is not contained by their body. It just flows out. And the character in that look, when he brought it in, because I don't, if I started doing commissions for everyone for their family, I'd never do anything else, especially for free. But he brought it in. He said, look, you've got to do that one. And so I said, actually, fair enough, I will. And so I actually did it on a darker paper so that I could use the white to bring out that kind of freshness to the skin and just that light in the eyes. I don't know, she's probably about, I don't know how old she would have been there, but that's got to be maybe 6 years ago now. So probably has a lot more attitude by now.
Wow. Anne says our first child born 15 weeks premature and in hospital for 3 months. Did not talk as early as other children. Wait a second. Sorry. I just want to, we've lost that. It's gone down. As other children of the same age, but before talking, he was drawing simple human faces as a way to communicate with us. We still have these drawings of faces and they're amazing. Pure feeling. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is it. It's that quite often when I talk to the young people, I'll kind of say to them about art, and I'll say, look, art is communication. That's what it is. And on one occasion I had a lad who absolutely hated art, and I dragged him through what he had to do just to get the credits. But one day I sat down and I said, art is communication. Why don't you like it? And he said, that's why. He said, I don't want to communicate. And I said, okay. I said, that's fine. But and we talked about it, and he essentially said, I don't want people to know who I am or what I think. And the guy had been through an incredibly tough life.
He had good reason not to share. Yeah.
Barrier. He said, I don't want to share. And so that was fine. And we had a laugh for many, sadly he's passed away now, but we had a laugh for many years. And he was a character. He was a rogue, but he was an absolute character. You couldn't help but like the guy. But it was interesting that his communication about why he didn't want to communicate was so honest.
So he had communicated.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, well, they're just absolutely. It's a pity there's not more. And somebody put it that obviously people have been checking your website, that you do drawings or portraits of babies.
Well, yeah, again, that's something quite often family or friends have got in touch and said, could you do this? And yeah, well, this is the thing. I love the drawing. And so, yes, I absolutely do. And I love doing them. It really is a pleasure. It's like when I get 3, 4 hours into a drawing, it's that same feeling you get when you're deep in ritual and the time just doesn't have any meaning anymore. It's just wonderful. So yeah, I do, and that is the drawing is very much within my comfort zone. So for instance, a drawing I'll sit down to and I'll get it done in a couple of weeks, but I've got paintings upstairs I've been working at for 5 years. So yeah, so the oil painting is a bit slower.
Jamie says just about the communication piece. Yes, it is communication. Well said. It's a language. Whoa, that was an interesting story about sharing self. Thank you for sharing that, Gem. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting about that young man who was aware of how art would have revealed more of himself.
Yeah.
Had a very deep appreciation of what you can convey through your work.
Yes, yeah, he's yeah, as I said, it was there was so much going on. I think he just felt it was something he couldn't open up because there was too much there. But sometimes I find with a lot of people we might deal with, and actually just with each other, we have this saying about, often a young person just needs one good adult.
Yes.
Often with friends, it can just be one comment they need to hear. And it's getting that right comment, knowing the right thing to say, and sometimes it's just being there. Like I was saying with visiting my mum, um, you know, you're not going to sit there and sort of be the druid and spill wisdom. Wish I could, but I don't have a memory for that. Sometimes you just got to be there. It's a company, the time we share with each other, that's important.
Oh, presence. Yeah.
Mm,
As in
yes,
presence, not presents.
yes,
Yeah.
and
And
presents.
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
That the being with, and often without words, that it's just being there is can be really, really important. Or
Mm.
those full silences between you and the other person.
Yes.
How nurturing and healing that can be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have spent all this time talking about art, and I bet you there were hundreds of more things that we haven't discussed. So,
Yes. Yeah.
but it's been absolutely just amazing. Like I often ask about, achievements. You have certainly, these are just incredible achievements. Pat says to keep you going till midnight. I'd love to do that. But what are you grateful for?
Um, you know what? In my own kind of daily practice, I get up at 6:30 and I do a travel spell. Some people would think of it as a prayer. I talk to the guardians that guard our house and land. I talk to kind of what I would term allies. You see, when I was in the UK, I worked with the beach. I grew up under this beech tree that eventually I had my magical working under, and then got handfasted under, and so I always worked with the beach. But when I moved here, um, strangely enough, it was the blackthorn I made connection with. Um, the blackthorn for me was being a stranger in a strange land, and moving here when I did was a very strange time and not always welcomed by not by everybody.
Yep.
You meet all sorts wherever you go, and the blackthorn gave me such a strong feeling of protection and welcome. It was part of our linking with the land. That was an incredibly strong thing. So I do that. I work with these different energies, and I usually end up, because my journey into work is about 45 minutes, and
Mhm.
that's usually I would start my work about quarter of an hour before I leave, and I usually finish as I'm driving into the car park, and I've usually finished off with the Druid's Prayer and the Druid's Prayer for Peace, um, and but out of all that, during that time, the one thing that I am most grateful for, I always say to the gods, I'm grateful for life, for being here, for this experience, because everything that we get is on that plate, but it's the plate that provides us with that. It's, the blessing of actually enjoying this incarnation, and experiencing it is the first thing. It
Mm.
holds everything else within it, and that's what I'm really grateful for, is this experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. Is there anything you change about your life?
um it's funny, actually, because when Melanie and I were talking through before she spoke to you, this was a question that came up a few times, and my first response in a classically kind of stubborn and egotistical way was, no, I've learned from my mistakes, and etc., etc. Actually, I think Adrian said this sort of better than me in a sense, but in time I've realized, because I can be very inside my own head, and I can be, a bit withdrawn. The emotion is there, of being the kind of classic scorpionic thing. It's there. I have Cancer rising as well, so I'm a very. I actually have 7 planets. Yeah, sort of 4 planets in Virgo, 3 in Scorpio, I think, something like that. But anyway, so I think, looking back, yes, there is one thing I would change, and it comes back to what we were saying about presence, about being with people. There are times when I was so wrapped up in life that I didn't take a moment to sit with someone. Or now, I don't have children of my own. I'm a stepdad to a fantastic guy who has gone on to earn 3 times what I earn. He's very successful and professional. He's a great guy, and but I don't have children of my own. We've always had dogs. I am a dog person. Um, but obviously, in a sense, when you take on a dog, it's like taking on a
Oh,
child
yeah.
that is going to pass away when they're 12 or 13. I
Mhm.
know, that sounds very odd, and it can be really hard. And I must admit, at times like that, a couple of years back, our 2 dogs that were brother and sister passed away. And yeah, you do look back and you think, there were times when I could have taken 20 minutes more to just sit with them, to take that time. And I think, it's the whole thing John Lennon said about life is what happens when you're busy making plans. That's the only thing I regret, is that, and maybe a part of it, I think, is a very male energy, this sort of out and doing, that I can get very stuck in my own head. And I think the only thing I would ever regret is, like with Jan, my fantastic art tutor, when we were over here, because we didn't have the money to um, go anywhere. He would say to me, "Oh, when you come over to London, come and visit me and things." And I kept putting it off. And I didn't know at the time he had prostate cancer.
Oh.
And when I finally made the time, he had died. And things like that, I think it's so easy to forget that. I love Stoicism. I read a lot of Stoicism. I love Marcus Aurelius.
Mhm.
And this whole idea of, live every day as if it could be your last, because it's so important. Those times are important. So yes, I've now given you a really long answer for what I would change, whereas when I was first discussing the question with Melanie, my attitude was no, nothing. So yeah, that's the
I
only
don't
thing.
think it's particularly a male thing. I think we all get busy. There've been times when my kids were young, when I've been working all day. I'm tired, exhausted. I have to cook,
Yeah.
and things have to be done. And one of them wants my attention, and I'm saying I can't do it now, because if I don't feed you now, there's going to be a knock-on effect. But what they needed was that time and not being able to do it. And I
Yeah.
think missed opportunities. And I think that's for any of us, because any of us who's busy, and I think that applies to most of us,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So it's,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sean Hinchliff, who's in West Yorkshire, has a question. Do you incorporate another faith with your druidry, or is it druidry alone? He asks because Philip Cargon once said he mixes different faiths and gets ideas.
Well, it's interesting. As I said to you, I kind of started walking a pagan path when I was fairly young. But all the years before that, it always strikes me as funny when people say, "Oh, what do you believe?" And I think Jung said it best. He said, "I don't believe, I know."
Yeah.
And for as long as I can remember, I was talking to God as a kid. God was very imminent, was there. It was the person I had discussions with. And this developed along my path. So even though, I would be very much an animist, I see spirit in everything. And even though for years I didn't work with specific deities, I think I had a fear of the marvelization of deity. So I worked with the Lord and Lady, the God and Goddess. In a sense, it's just, it's a binary system of kind of energy and stasis and things like this. But I think it's important to remember that we can never know divinity. And I use the term divinity more often because the whole thing about all gods are one god, all goddesses are one goddess. It's the same way that a Hindu could be seen as a pagan and a monotheist, because it's a journey of spirit, and that's a journey we're on. So I suppose in an odd kind of way, I've always viewed myself as a pagan. I see spirit in everything. I get funny looks when I do drive into the car park and I say thank you to the ticket machine. And things like that. I do kind of feel that everything is animate in its own way. That's just always been my knowledge. But I think, our brain developed to help us run away from stuff. And so it's not really a tool that's geared to understand a multi-dimensional universe. One of the things I often say to the kids, and I won't go on long with this, but it's one of the things I love the most to discuss with them. I talk about, and this is something I actually really got as I finished the Bardic grade, because I went through I'm always a slow learner. If the lesson is taught in the Bardic grade, I'll work it out in the Ovate grade.
Eventually.
I'm the one who 2 hours after class finished goes, oh, like that, but basically I often say to them, I talk about the fact that science has kind of talked about cell replacement. And there's this common thing where they basically say, over the period of 5 to 7 years, every single cell in your body has been replaced. Now, I'm not saying there's something special about that period of time. But when I say that, and I'm discussing this with young people, I say, okay, so do you remember something from when you were 9? And they'll say, yes. And I'll say, tell me a story. Tell me what that was. And they'll come out with this story. And I'll say, okay, so we know that every single cell in your body has been replaced since that time. So who remembers the story? Because there is nothing sitting in that chair that was there when the events you're describing happened. And it makes you realize that we are not this single being walking through the world. We're a story that is telling itself endlessly to itself while it's replacing bits. I often, so this is why I kind of look at the world as animate, because I view myself more like a city rather than one object. And I think everything around is like that. So sorry, it's been a rather long-winded way of explaining that. I'm not sure my kind of belief system. Druidry for me has brought in a fascination with the world. I suppose a lot of my druidry is more like a philosophy, although I would say older philosophy. new philosophy seems to have gone into an area of navel gazing and discussing the meaning of a word. But yeah, so I would say probably I take a bit from many different people that think different things. I love The Prophet, the poem. I took so much from that. I'm actually listening through the Bible on audiobook just out of pure curiosity. I really get what people get from Christianity. I don't really get the story side of it. It's fascinating as a historical document. I read the Sinzing Ming, which is a 6th century. It's basically the root of Zen Buddhism, and all of these things they're just different people looking at the same thing in different ways. So yeah, it's I'll have to go out and buy a sort of splendid frock and start my own religion.
I mean, I've always known that, every 7 years everything's gone, but I actually hadn't ever thought, like who was there when I was 9, I mean, that's really, what is that thread, or what is that essence that we bring with us, which, that if it's just our physical, how unimportant it is in many, many ways. It's merely a vessel to carry our spirit with us. Fascinating. So Stephanie says, as an animist myself, I always come back to the idea that all beliefs could be accurate. If we could all accept or respect each other's beliefs and be open to the concept that we are not the all-knowing, when it comes to what everyone else should believe, we'd be so much better off. I couldn't agree with you more, Stephanie.
Yeah, it's funny, to take the words from a demon of sorts. Oliver Cromwell was well renowned for writing to a more manic friend of his in Scotland and saying, "Consider, sir, you may be wrong." When you've got someone like that saying, think about the fact that you may not actually be correct, it kind of is a little jolt, a little reminder for all of us that the more I learn, the more I realize just how much I just absolutely don't know. And I think that's actually one thing which I do. It's why I don't do rituals the same way twice, because I really don't like, not that I don't like, but I don't feel comfortable with dogma. With this point, when we decide this is how something is, you might as well hang up the sign that says done thinking, because you're not open to anything new. So I'm just learning all the time. And, it's why I love the job I do, because whether I'm teaching, like I was teaching one lady in her 90s, Melanie, I think one of the students was, or I'm teaching someone who's 15 and just joined the centre, I'm just blown away by how much I learn from them all.
It's wonderful. Just Gabriella corrects you. Brain cells don't get replaced. They last the entire lifetime. The rest of the cells get replaced. Interesting.
I don't know. I certainly, in some of the bits I'd read, it actually said every cell was replaced, but that's fascinating if that's the case.
This is something for us all to research.
Yeah, exactly, something to look up. But I do feel it's, I mean, this is why they're finding that a lot of people's memories can be so questionable, because it is a case of Chinese whispers. And when you look at the fact that our life is a story we're telling, that to me just suddenly, that everything that I developed through the bardic grade just fell into place. And I thought, wow, of course, we're all storytellers because we're living a life.
That's right. So we're coming to the end. And I mean, I wish we didn't have to come to an end, but if you're getting up at 6 a.m, you need to get to sleep. I am not a morning person. I am a night owl. So my last question, what is your favorite season and what is your favorite ceremony to mark the Wheel of the Year?
My favorite ceremony, it's difficult because I love all the seasons. I would say that for instance, I love May Day. I love the spring, the energy of it. And especially because we have 3 acres, we're full of ideas and we're always doing things. I enjoy the summer well enough, but it's actually the hardest season for us. It's where we're working the hardest. There's the most to do. I love the autumn, that kind of sweet sadness almost to the autumn, but I love that. And I love the winter because It's a time when we get to rest, we have the range going, and we get creative. So I think with the seasons, it's very much something I try to. I get the full enjoyment out of every season, every day. Today is my favorite day always. Um, but when it comes to ceremony, I've got to say, and it's probably because I'm just a big kid, Yule, midwinter is my favorite ceremony. And the reason is because whatever the faith, and even where I used to live, there was a lot of large Muslim population. But, everyone was stopping for Christmas, for midwinter, for, whatever term they put on it. There's almost like this global recognition of a time where people are perhaps a little bit kinder. And that's what I love about it. I don't really mind, it doesn't matter to me why people think they're celebrating it. Um, I love that festival because I think people join together somehow. It's funny, one thing that I love, I know Pat has very sensibly got you into Terry Pratchett. And I
Yes.
think that the Tiffany Aiken books are possibly amongst the best magical books written in the sort of later part of the 20th century. But at the end of Hogfather, he makes a comment about man and believing. There's this little speech he goes on where Death is saying that you have to believe the little lies so you can believe the big ones, because the big ones are things like justice. Because he says you can grind down the atoms, you won't find a single atom of justice, but we choose to believe in it. And he says that man is the point where the falling angel meets the rising ape. And I think that's a lovely term for soul, for spirit and body together. And there is something about that to the Yule, to the Midwinter Festival. So, yeah, and so I think, being the big kid I am, that's probably my favorite.
Oh, Gabriella likes to bet which festival is the favorite. She said Lunasa, but sorry, Gabriella. She said it's good. This is not with money.
Well, actually, you see, Melanie works so hard through that festival because of corn dollies and the harvest and all the harvest customs, and it's wonderful. And it is, we thoroughly enjoy it. In our seed group, I think we made bread one year, didn't we, as well, and doing the corn dollies and things. But yes, there's just that moment of rest and calm and silence when you get to those dark days of the year. That kind of suit me in that sense.
Listen, we've gone over the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
It has been just an absolute joy talking to you. There've been absolutely wonderful responses. So thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. So I just allow you to say goodbye to everybody.
Well, yes, thank you very much for all the great sort of comments and ideas. I'll definitely have a look through that. And yeah, it's lovely. It's really, I was actually really nervous before coming on, so I thoroughly enjoyed it, Eimear. Thank you.
Yeah, and so we can look at those because there's so many comments that we need to look at that we didn't get to respond to. So I'll just send you backstage and I'll just say goodbye to everybody. So listen, thank you so much for joining us again this evening and for your wonderful comments. And it's been such a joy talking to Wolf and reading about his creativity. So I look forward to seeing you next week for another Fireside Chat, which will be before our, actually it'll be after Imulk, but we're having the Orders Imulk ceremony will be on Saturday, the 5th of February, and that is at 7 p.m. Universal Time. So I look forward to seeing you next week and at our Imulk ceremony. Until then, be slán, be well and safe, and slán go fóill.